the love of the, but way in the back is an older brother in the shadows. Or is that the older brother on the right? I don't know. On the left. And but he's so there's quite the story, and Jesus has given us the story. All I want to know is, I'm just sitting back with my son, is the pain of it is I didn't know whether to be angry or happy. Does that make sense to you? Because when I saw him, I just hugged him. I was so full of happiness. I found my son. And then the next breath, I just wanted to just wave my finger, young man, don't you ever do that again. Well, if you can feel any of that, I'm wondering if some of that's going on here, and for us to understand what God has been doing. We even use the term the prodigal son in our common parlance. It's used all the time. And we've had so many stories. I know stories, I hear stories of people who have prodigals, children who are wasteful and spendthrift and are gone. I want to talk today about this, and I want to just give a preface that I am mildly concerned that it doesn't come across very inclusive. And so I do want to give acknowledgement to mothers and daughters and mothers and sons and children. This isn't just about fathers, okay? This is about parenthood, but I am going to land on the fatherhood piece, and I'm going to sit on it. So please understand that I want to be inclusive to all. Jesus is telling us 3 parables, actually, in Luke 15. If you're new to the church, you want to know something here. This is a great chapter to read, the whole thing, because there's 3 little parables. And I know so many of you are so learned, you know this and could be preaching this as well as I could. But it is good to know the nature and heart of God. And I'm convinced that most of us do not have a clear understanding of what the nature and heart of God is. And Luke 15 will give you a greater sense of the heart of God than any other chapter in all of Scripture, as far as I'm concerned. It's my go-to. First parable, of course, is the lost sheep. Those are verses 4 to 7. And he's got a flock, and there's 100 of them, and one of them goes astray. And what does he do? He leaves the 99 and goes and looks. And that's unwise, right? You know. So God is prepared to be unwise. He's extravagant. He's almost foolish. He wants to go and find you. Maybe you have gone astray. That's the piece. And then there's the other parable, of course, of the lady who loses her valuable silver coin, verses 8 to 10. She searches high and low and sweeps the house until she finds it. And when she finds it, she rejoices. Feminine image, just interesting, okay? That Jesus, that's in there in Luke. So that's a real positive thing, because I believe God is ultimately beyond that gender piece. But ultimately, he uses the story of the woman, and when she finds it, she rejoices. And she asks the whole community to come and rejoice with her, because what was lost is found. I was lost, but I'm found. Third parable of this trilogy is my focus for today. And I hope some of this will land fresh with you, because I'm so confident so many of you know this so well. This young whippersnapper asks his father for his inheritance. He goes to his father and he says, "Dad, I want the money that's my due when you die, and I want it now." Do you get the insult there? Do you get the insult? It's like my son's coming to me and asking for their inheritance now. Please. How disrespectful. And yet, even in the story, the father is gracious and kind enough that he gives the son what he asks for. Be careful what you ask for from God. He might give it to you. Okay, there's a point. All I know is that when my boys were younger and they were in inheritance, in line for an inheritance, I made it clear that if something happened to me, they didn't get all the money right away because they would just go spend it on fast cars, right? Hopefully just fast cars, not fast women, but fast cars, right? And then what they would do is when they became of older age, they would get their inheritance. So it's a huge piece. It's a real insult. The parable is pointing, friends, to the extravagant nature of God's love for us. And I can dance and pout and try to emphasize this so that you get it. And somehow it's got to land that God's extravagant love is beyond our understanding. He's an infinitely loving Father. So this young son, he goes off into the country where he's not known. He squanders his inheritance on wine, women, song, chocolate. I don't know what it is. In verse 17, buried in the middle of this text, it says he came to himself. I hate that line. Okay. He came to himself. There was an awakening. Was it a spiritual awakening or was it just a reality check? I'm not sure which, to be honest with you. But there was, I have to hope there was this, it's a metaphor, it's a spiritual awakening. I lean into that it's a spiritual wake-up call. It says, oh my God, what have I done? And literally, oh my God, what have I done? Not, oh my goodness. We're talking such despair. He comes to his senses, and what does he do? He goes back to the family. He knows that maybe that's where he can go. But before that, because he's in such a bad way, he ends up feeding the pigs. He's taking a job feeding pigs. Trust me, the Jewish audience that was listening to Jesus, that did not go past them. They caught that one. This boy it's a metaphor for saying as low as you can get. For my sermon today, I phoned a friend of mine who works in penal reform. I'm going to revisit that in a moment, but I was talking to Becky. She serves as a chaplain in the prisons and in the courthouse. And she says the stuff that she sees will just rock your world. I've known her a long time, and I've seen what goes on with the drug addiction and the pain and the poverty. We're talking feeding pigs. We're talking about people who are really down and out, and she's in a position to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with them right there. And it's amazing. Because sometimes those people actually have ears to hear. And sometimes we have to be so low before we can hear a sad truth. So anyway, this is what this boy does. So he says, I'm going to go. I'm going to go talk to my dad. I'm going to go home. So this young son goes, he starts heading home. It says here that the father in this parable is so full of compassion, it's in verse 20, that he sees his son coming up the road. I have this image of the father almost. He's at the house and he's looking. He's looking for his son to come home. You have a sense that God's that eager for you? That he's here and he's looking. And the son comes, and yes, the son's going to confess. He's going to say some things. But you know what the text actually says is that the father, and if I could do this, but we're on Zoom, so I won't do it because I'll just be out of the camera shot. But basically, the father runs to the child before the child can even repent. It's kind of my image of what's going on here. That the father is so full of compassion. He's not waiting for the words. He's running to the son. And please note, in Middle Eastern culture, and maybe some of you here know this even better than I do, but I have been informed that in certainly ancient Middle Eastern culture, the male patriarch of the home did not run. You walk with dignity. You don't go running off for your son. You might feel it, but you don't do it. Because propriety and dignity and family form is still all important. But interestingly, Jesus, knowing that, actually says that in the middle of this parable. This is that the boy comes to the conclusion, I am not a slave, I am the son. And you need to recognize you're not a slave, you are a child of God, you are a son and a daughter. You got to own that. Today, I'm not even going to touch on the older brother. It's just too much. It's just, the older brother, however, is, as you probably know, just as prodigal as the younger son. He's at home, but he's as far away from God, far away from his father, following all the rules. So what's the saying to us? It's saying that God wants relationship. And he wants you to be in that relationship with him. That's where we need to try to move to. But it's the Father I want you to grasp. Consider what we would probably do. I don't know what you would do. Like I said, when I lost my son, I had this mixed emotion. I read that Father Capon, he's an Anglican priest, writer. He wrote a book called The Parables of Grace. And this is one of the classics within it. And he has this image, and he says, well, Dad, Father, all the girls in the dorm and all this, I'm really sorry, Dad. And it's as though the father responds with this, chill out. I don't want to hear it. I'm glad you're home. Save the flowery speech for your application to law school. Okay? But buck up, buddy. You see, that's I think what we expect from father and son relationships, authority and child relationships. And that's what's unexpected about this parable in my mind. You see, when I think about Jesus, and when I hear people talk about Jesus, what I'm hearing is we expect Jesus to jack up the ethical standards. You know, like what's the standard we're supposed to live by? That's not what happens in this parable. Those are not the words of the Father. There's no rebuke. It is unconditional love. We throw those phrases around, unconditional love, maybe too quickly, because we don't know. I think most of our love is conditional, is my point. Okay, it tends to be conditional. You do this, you get that. And that's not God's economy. God's economy is so full of grace that it's unreasonable to us. And that's what's going on here. And I just want somehow for us to dive into those prodigals. Homecomings for prodigals? Fine, I guess. But maybe he should be dressed in sackcloth and ashes. And what does the father do? He puts a robe on him. He gives him a ring. The ring is sign of authority in the family. Puts shoes on his feet. Okay? You're my son. And he lifts him up and holds him and embraces him. This is how God feels about you. And my experience as a pastor is 85% of people do not believe that. 85% of it's a number I picked out of the air. 80%, 90%. I don't know. I'm just so struck at how many of us do not feel the love of God in that way. I think we would think that the father might say, okay, son, lose the earring, okay, and go get a meal. I know you're hungry. And then you go talk to your mother because she's worried sick over what you've put her through. Do you hear the judgment there or the correction? And I think we do that as human beings. And I think the son already knows what he needs to do. That's not what happens. This daddy is over the top and there are no questions. So let me tell you where this parable takes me. I want to ask, what kind of parent are you? So I've just shifted the sermon because the sermon is I want you to absorb the love of God for you. But now I want to say you're a Christian and you've been a Christian a long time. And it's easy to kind of pick on the older son who's kind of in the house, but he still doesn't get it. I think that a lot of you do get it. Good people. But what I want us to do is learn from the Father. What kind of fathers are we? Parents, mothers included, yes. But what kind of dads are we? What kind of signals do we communicate to our children, to our sons and daughters, who so desperately need to know and to feel unconditional love, especially from fathers? Now back to my friend Becky, and I talked to her and I asked if she could confirm some of these numbers. I've got some slides here. I'm not going to do them all, but let's just put up statistics on fatherless families from the National Center of Fathering. Now, I took information from Europe and the United States, didn't find much clarity on the internet for Canada. 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. Apparently, there's like 1,000 suicides a day in the world. You add that up, that's crazy. Suicide is very real. Now, 90% of all homeless and runaway children are from fatherless homes, 32 times the average. Scary. Next slide, please. 85% of youth who are currently in prison grew up in fatherless homes. That's staggering, and that's one of the reasons I phoned Becky, and I said, Becky, tell me this isn't true. And she said, it's bang on. You know the stories, and they don't have the guidance, and that's why they're in the penal system. Friends, we need parents, but I'm telling you, we need fathers. And as difficult as this is to hear, there is something uniquely different. I'm going to move on to a slide that says 24.7 million children. I'm not going to do them all. 24.7 million children in the United States live in a home where their biological father is not present. 24.7 million, that's 1 in 3, they say. This equates to 1 in 3 children in the United States. Girls who live in a fatherless home have a 100% higher risk of suffering from obesity than girls who have their father present. Teen girls from fatherless homes are also 4 times more likely to become mothers before the age of 20. What is the role of the father? 72%. The problem is not Republicans and Democrats and the economy. All these things are important. 72% of Americans believe that a fatherless home is the most significant social problem and family problem that is facing the country. The family, folks. Justice begins in your home. When we start caring and nurturing our children. And I want to make sure that people recognize that there are some flaws and notes within these statistics. I don't want people to feel intimidated, especially if you're divorced. There are people who have huge impact on their children's lives who live in separate homes. But you know, I'm not speaking to that. I don't understand the mystery of this, but old Harry Chapin came to mind. The Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon, Little Boy Blue, and The Man in the Moon. When you're going to come home, son? I don't know when, but we'll get together then, you know. We all have a good time then. And of course, it never happened. That was the point of the song. That there was a father who said, yeah, I'll be there by that amount of time, but I'll be there, and it'll happen, and it doesn't happen. The consequences for the fallout of the family are so huge, we're feeling it all through society, and we're feeling it in the church, we're feeling it in the schools, we're feeling how we educate from those statistics I was reading, from suicide. This is, so I'm gonna share one more bit of statistics and then some application, and I can wrap up there. I know not everybody's seen the statistics, but this one is staggering to me, and it comes out of Switzerland. It is, it doesn't go up on the screen. It's called Demographic Characteristics of the Linguistic and Religious Groups in Switzerland. And it was talking about church attendance and faith development among children who are now adults. Now get this one. Detailed survey indicated that if fathers attend church regularly and the mother is non-practicing, the children have a 44% chance of becoming a regular church. So the number is way higher if mom and dad go to church. So there's your point. Okay, so let's get that one. All right. But if dad goes to church, mom doesn't, children have a 44% chance of becoming church in their lifetime and having a faith walk. Get this one. I don't like to read it. But if the mother attends regularly and the father is non-practicing, number plummets to 2% of the children become regular. So what do you do with that? It's mystery, folks. What goes from a father to a child is so huge we don't understand it. We need our mothers, we need our nurture, we have the family. But as Becky tells me in the prisons, Mother's Day, there's all sorts of cards. No one even asks for Father's Day cards. This is staggering. They're so estranged. Just back to this one. If the father's, even if the father is an irregular attender and the mother is not practicing, a full 25% of their children become regular attenders. So I don't know what you do with those statistics, but it tells me something is that the impact of men as fathers in our society is staggering, and we need to learn from the prodigal story of the father in the story we call the prodigal son. My call to you today, gentlemen in particular, is that we need to step up to the plate. We just need to. I don't want to go to church today. It's too cold outside. I didn't want to come either. I did, but nonetheless. We need to step up to our spiritual duties and must know that if we continue to advocate our responsibilities, not only will our churches fall apart, but so will our families. Children need parents who can communicate, parents who are able to show unconditional love, and who are investing time with their children. And there's a mystery there. It is not ideal to only have mommy. We need fathers for our emotional development, or certainly so it seems. So I have a couple of quick points. One, real men know how to communicate their feelings. And most men have not learned how to communicate their feelings, especially if you come from a home that didn't have a father that role modeled it. Or you come out of a family where all of a sudden it's just difficult. And men, it seems, have a more difficult time learning how to communicate. It seems that the father was able to communicate in this prodigal story, and he communicated unconditional love. A lot of the men, it's bottled up. And it manifests itself in rage. Men expressing so much anger. So we make a story and a joke about anger management and so on. It needs to be learned how to control your emotions and to be in touch with your emotions. Healthy men are in touch with their emotions. And I find that more often than not, as a generalization in my experience, women are just a little better at being in touch with their emotions. It's the family core. And so I look at men at sporting events. I just want to run around. Sorry. At sporting events, right? The Montreal Canadiens beat the Toronto Maple Leafs, and everybody went, yay, right? No, whatever. I'm mad. But I get really excited. So what is this? Where's all this emotion coming from? But all of a sudden I have to talk about something serious, and then I just clam up. Can I talk about those things? This is why you need church. You need a community to help support you. That's why you go to Bible studies. Not just to study the Bible, but to learn how to communicate, how to talk, how to be relational. This is a learning place, the school, called the church. You don't just quit school, grade 12 or whatever it is. It's a lifelong thing. Where two real men are able to show graciousness. Note how much freedom this father gave his son. And so often I see in parents, fathers in particular, laying down the law. We get too strict, too fast, I believe. It's better to have a husband and wife in the household to balance one another off, I think. I think single parent is just the most enormous task. I can barely get my head around it. Hard enough doing it with two. And there's a check and a balance. We're a little too hard there. When your spouse, maybe your wife, speaks into your life and says, you're just a little too tough. Do you listen? Or do you get reactive? I think we need to recognize that real men are gracious. It is painful indeed when we see our kids wander off, but it is part of the nature of being a mature parent. We need to instill responsible freedom in our youth. So we get very strict. I sense that a lot, especially Christians. And how many people I've seen in Christian homes where the children have grown up and then they rebel and they react and they run away because mom and pop were too narrow. Look at the prodigal father. Look at the graciousness of the father. And it's a cross to be that gracious. It's hard to be that gracious. Back to my son in my opening story. I didn't know whether to hug him or spank him. And obviously, hugging him was the right answer. Lastly, probably the most important one in my mind that I want to point out to you is note that the prodigal son had something to come back to. He had been raised in the faith. His father had taught him. We pray for that Sunday school. What's going on in there right now with those kids is probably one of the most important things going on here this morning. That the children learn the story. They learn the faith and it shapes them. And it's taught to them in their homes. Because we all individuate. We all start to separate. We're close to the family and we separate and we have to find that elastic band. And as the child moves away in their teens, as invariably as they will, and if they get into trouble, do they know what to come back to? Have they got something to come back to? Can they go, yeah, mom, dad, they had their act together. Yeah, I didn't think so, but now I'm starting to recognize maybe they did have their act together. I always used to tell my kids, party on Friday night at my house. Bring the neighbors' kids in. And sometimes there was things going on that I didn't like, but I knew it was in my house. And it was safer than them out on the streets. Friends, we have to pass on the faith to our children. And today, the crisis is that these prodigal children have nothing to return to. And what happens is they move into a gang if they're really prodigal. They find a new family. It's not just a solo story. Here's the other one I need to point out, and then I can wrap up. But it's tied in. It's called quality time. I hear people say, I'll just have quality time with the kids. I get really nervous when I hear the phrase quality time. Fathers, you like to work 16 hours a day? Feel good about it? Go home. Go home and fix the toilet that didn't get fixed. And be around the house once in a while when the kids come home. We sell our souls to our employers. It's dangerous. Quality time is, I've decided to have quality time with my son between 2 and 3 on Saturday afternoon. It doesn't work that way. You got to hang out. You got to sit around. You got to be there. It's the ministry of presence. And it takes time, and it might even be taxing on you, but you have a responsibility to your children. And this is why the other piece is, why it's so important in the church, is that if you're going to hire a youth pastor, just going with statistics, I'm recommending overall, you hire a male youth pastor because of the statistics I read to you. My kids didn't always listen to me, but they listened to the youth pastor. And so this is part of the reason. What about the single mother who comes in here, who has a child who needs care and support? She needs male figures around for her kids. That's why you come to church. It's why we are a part of that community. I wrap up. I'm going to share one last story that had a huge impact on me. I was a little slow in the story part of it as I watched it, but it was years ago. It was at a music recital for these little children. They were doing piano and clarinet and doing whatever they did. And none of them were very good, but there was this one little girl, and she was playing piano, and her father was turning the sheet music for her. So she was able to play piano. And when she was finished, and she didn't do a very good job, she jumped off the seat and ran into her father's arms. And they hugged, and he twirled her around. It wasn't very appropriate in that setting. He didn't care, which is the most beautiful thing. And the mother sitting next to me whispered into my ear and said, I wish my father had done that. And I, of course, foolishly said, what, turn the music pages? And she said, no. Love me like that. That's the love of the Father, friends. Let us be compassionate. Let us be listening. Let us be committed. Because God is so committed to you. His love is so overwhelming. Bless you in your walk. In Jesus' name. Amen.